Welcome to another episode of Not From Concentrate, a food podcast for busy brains. I'm Catherine Smart. I'm a writer, a recipe developer, and a food entrepreneur. And like many creatives, I have ADHD. So I'm on a mission to help anyone with a busy brain spark creativity, calm the chaos, and tap into their unique superpowers to find joy in the kitchen.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
Today, we're chatting with Clare Langan, culinary producer and author of the On Cooking newsletter on Substack. Clare is a true culinary multi-hyphenate and what I call a professional home cook. Like me, she's worked for years in private chefing, and we're definitely going to get into that. But she's also worked in food TV. She's worked on cookbooks, in retail, and as a cooking teacher. She's worked for top brands like Sur La Table and Williams-Sonoma. All this means she has serious kitchen chops and practical cooking advice, as well as tips for getting the best deals on equipping your kitchen, and of course, how to host like a true pro. I'm so excited to have Clare here today. Let's get right into it. I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Not From Concentrate newsletter on Substack. Subscribe for free to stay up to date on new episodes and get access to giveaways and bonus content. I also want to give a special shout out to my paid subscribers who get new, wildly delicious and distraction-proof recipes delivered to their inboxes every month, as well as essays and tips for cooking with a busy brain. Plus, paid subscribers get access to my full recipe archive. Head to catherinesmart.com to become a free or paid subscriber, and thank you for supporting the show. Clare Langan, welcome to the Not From Concentrate podcast.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. This is really exciting, and I haven't done a podcast in a while, so this is really fun.
I feel like you are such a true culinary multi-hyphenate. I think of you as a culinary producer. I love your Substack. I love the video content you've made and the way that you write about food. But for anybody who is not yet subscribed to On Cooking, can you just give a brief background of, what you're up to these days and how you got started in food?
I've been in food for 15 years. I've always loved cooking, grew up in a food family, but studied something else entirely in college. And then a couple years after school, I went to culinary school. I quit my job, became a nanny, went to cooking school in New York. And then honestly, all the closed doors that I was finding in my previous endeavors trying to get a job in editorial or fashion, which is what I studied in school, all those closed doors, they opened when I chose culinary. So I felt like I had a lot of momentum, and I honestly have been working pretty much straight through with some periods of freelancing in between. But yeah, I focused my career on helping the home cook. So my goal going to culinary school was to serve the home cook. And back in 2011, that was kind of unheard of. This is pre-Instagram, blogs were a thing, but cooking in a restaurant was seen as the highest level of achievement in food. And I saw other paths in the industry that I wasn't quite sure what they were yet, but I followed my curiosity. So that led me to working in test kitchens and then as a private chef. And then a good chunk of my career was spent as a culinary instructor, which I still do now off and on. But I led the culinary program at Sur La Table. And that was a really important time because I was learning my culinary voice. I was learning how to sell, which is something that I carried through my career. I was learning about what the home cook actually likes, what they are interested in, which is way more simple than I thought. People would always ask me about what salt to use, what oil to use, what pans to use, what cookware. And then left Sur La Table and went freelance as a culinary producer. I'd been working off and on as a food stylist and prop stylist and culinary producer, and produced a show for A&E with my collaborator, Joel Gammeren, who was working on a food waste and travel series with Katie Couric. That was another big break in my career. Took me completely out of my day-to-day comfort zone. Was traveling across the country, cooking, and we worked on 2 seasons of the show. And I know you were a culinary producer, are a culinary producer as well, so we can get into what that actually means. But yeah, long story short, eventually moved out here to California, to the Bay. I was looking to leave New York and kind of city shopping. And I loved the Bay Area, and I kind of had a few different pots on the stove in different cities, a few different job offers, but I was relocated out here for a role as a culinary director at World Market, the retailer. And my retail experience at Sur La Table and working with brands really helped me in that role. And I loved that job, but I was laid off during COVID. And really, like, the thing that's really defined my career has been pivots. And so after World Market, I was pretty devastated, but I pivoted to like learning how to shoot TikToks. And that got me my next job at a food tech startup that specializes in content aggregation, and shooting a lot of TikToks and Reels actually came out when I was at that job. So it was a really big kind of push in that direction. And then I saw a job opening at Williams-Sonoma. And I always thought to myself, like, living in the Bay, if all else fails, there's always Williams-Sonoma, and they're based here. I hadn't really seen anything that looked right for me, but there was a content director position open, and I went for it. They actually created another job for me. Long story there, but I did eventually become culinary or content director rather. And I was there for about 3 years, which I always say in Williams-Sonoma years is like 10, because it's a pretty rigorous place to work. And yeah, I left a year ago. So it's been a little over a year that I've been freelance, and starting my Substack was something that I was kind of dabbling in when I was at Williams-Sonoma. It wasn't encouraged to do a lot of work outside of my job, but I was like, you know what? I can write a Substack. It's a little less visible than like posting Reels or working with brands. It seemed like an emerging platform, and I have always loved writing and consider myself a writer. So it was sort of a low lift kind of thing to do. And I would say putting a paywall up has motivated me like so much. I would say that it's like one of those things, like, people, I don't know, do they talk about it? Maybe not. But like, I feel like I owe it to people to produce like high quality content for them and to share tested, vetted recipes. And so my Substack on cooking is about cooking, but I am really evolving it into things all around cooking. So everything from cookware guides to how to grocery shop to like what the best ingredients are that season. I think about everything around it. So I actually joked with a friend last year that I didn't really want to publish recipes. And she was like, well, you have to publish recipes. I'm like, yeah, I guess I have to publish recipes. But I'm more interested in everything else that goes into it.
I think you said you were figuring out what home cooks want, and it's like simpler than you think. And I think about that a lot because you and I both have worked as, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've both worked in like personal private chef roles to kind of subsidize media careers at different points in our career. And I often have people ask me like, oh, what is it like? What is it like to be a private chef? And so often it's just like making a really great roast chicken or making a homemade macaroni and cheese. And the reality is, like, in the vast majority of the time, people just want good home cooked food. They're not necessarily looking for the fanciest piece of the puzzle. But between your recipe development, your time in retail, your time as a private chef, when I was thinking about, what are we going to sort of share with listeners today, I really wanted to home in a little bit on the idea of bringing a personal chef and everything that comes with it to the listener. And so one of the things I wanted to focus on was, how has your work as a personal chef shaped the way that you're speaking to your audience now on your Substack?
Personal, private chef, it's like interchangeable. I think the like sexy term now is like private chef, but like, is it really private if you were talking about it?
I thought the difference was that private chefs was like, you are salaried full-time for one family, and personal is like you have multiple clients and like stuff's being left in the fridge for reheating. But I don't know if that's still true.
No, I think that's like the technical term. And in that regard, I've been both. And we maybe have Wishbone Kitchen, Meredith Hayden to thank for like the private chef of it all. But all this to say, I've been doing it off and on since I graduated school. And like when I was doing it back then, like I was not qualified. Like I was a baby chef. Like my knife skills were crap. I worked with another lady, like she kind of taught me the ropes on like the etiquette. And I mean, I think a lot of it comes down, I was thinking about this too. And like, I have a weekly client on Tuesdays, and I was thinking about like my thought process. And first off, I'm a list maker. And I think that that's something like, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be like a Notion app situation. It can be a piece of scrap paper or on your phone, but making a list of like all the things that you need to know. You might not need to it might not be long. For me, I use shorthand. So getting the pot on the stove, getting like roasting carrots, roasting this, roasting that, like just thinking of thought process to make it go faster. Timing, people get really worked up on timing. And I think it's just making sure that your kitchen is working for you. So you always have something on the stove, usually a few pots on the stove. You always have something in the oven. You maybe have something marinating or soaking. I do a lot of like cashew dressings where I have to like soak the cashews or soak dried fruit. You always have things working for you. Maybe something is in the fridge or freezer. Like make your kitchen work for you. And that's a kind of a multitasking thing too that not everyone vibes with.
I love that. And yeah, I think it scares people, but it really is, I think it's like almost a muscle that you work up. I'm curious, do you still make the list? Because me, it lives in my brain, which is really dumb. Like I should, unless I'm doing like a serious event or something. Do you do a list? Walk me through your process of like setting yourself up for your Tuesday client.
I do make lists, and it's honestly, I think a lot of it is like so I can digest like what I'm doing, and like that's how I learn. So I have a template. It's like very basic, and it says oven, blender, oven, blender, stovetop, this time of year grill, and then prep. So it's like what's going on the stove, what's going in the oven. I do a lot of blending. I think that's like, it's a lot of blending, a lot of sauces, a lot of soups,
Brands, listen up, sponsor Clare.
I mean, for real. And then immersion blenders, what's getting grilled, what is just prep, like vegetable prep or like things that don't need any equipment or place on the in the kitchen. And that really helps my brain, because if I'm thinking like, okay, I have 3 things to blend, I'm going to start with, this is like really nitpicky, but like if I have 2 like similar sauces, let's say there's like a parsley-based sauce and a cilantro-based sauce, I'll do the parsley-based sauce first and then just like rinse on my blender quickly and then do the cilantro-based sauce.
These are the tricks that people don't know about that they should.
It's not going to mess up the flavor. It's all like salsa verde. But yeah, that's how I plan. And I still do this even if it's for like a small job or a dinner party. It's really helpful, especially if I have a sous chef where they can jump in and like cross things off. And I don't need to necessarily like manage them in the moment. I could just be like, look at the prep list. And the other thing that's like super, super specific, but I stand by this, is when you get home from the store, if you're doing like a prep, let's say you're doing like a meal prep for yourself, take everything out of the boxes, take everything out of the bags. If you have the time, wash things, but like at least take the stickers off the lemons and the apples. Open the cans, like any spices, take all the lids off. I don't know why, but this saves me so much time versus like you're in the flow zone and then you're like, oh darn, I have to like grab the can opener and then like gotta get scissors and like I just need to like grab. So this is something that I learned as a food stylist where like you have everything open, laid out, organized, ready to go, ready to grab.
This is so smart. And it's like, I sometimes do these things, and it probably goes back to the ADHD part of me. Like I have a hard time getting myself to do it. So I've never made a list and regretted it. I've often jumped in without the list and deeply regretted it later. But for me, sometimes I have to give myself a little treat, like, oh, well, I'll like have an iced coffee while I make the list, or like I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll pour a glass of wine and I'll do it, at the end of the day. I have to like treat myself. But those little investments in time when you're not in like the heat of the dinner making process, I think I totally agree with you, are so, so helpful. What was one of the most stressful things that have happened to you in your private chef times?
There's been a few. The one that comes to mind, I had a client and on Bond Street in Soho, which like who lives there? But I loved them. They were really lovely people. They had a beautiful apartment, and I was doing like postpartum meal prep for them. And I remember making something in a Pyrex or a glass baking dish. And I think it was a lasagna or like some kind of pasta bake. I hear a pop and I open the oven and it's completely shattered. The entire, glassy cheese.
It's like a bomb. That happened to me with a butternut squash pasta bake. It's like, word to the wise guys, Pyrex, if it goes from very cold to very hot, can blow up.
It was a blow up situation. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was like you had to turn the oven off, like cool the oven down. And then like, I remember using like a dustpan. Like, this is not it. And I think my client was home and they were really chill. And they're like, oh, just go to our other apartment. I'm like, what do you mean your other apartment? They're like, just go to the other apartment down the hall. Like, what do you mean? And so I like cleaned up and I brought everything down to their other apartment, and which was an entirely different space. And I finished my meal prep there.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't have another apartment down the hall, guys, you're going to have to stick with the dustpan and the oven mitts. But it's funny. I feel like it also gives us thicker skin for our own entertaining. I don't know about you. I feel like I think back to those like early personal chef days, and I definitely was not qualified and just feeling so stressed and so overwhelmed. And I feel like those things wouldn't bother me as much anymore. But something I also want to talk about, you had mentioned that, back in the day, it was like, what is this thing, personal chefing? And I am so with you, Claire. I knew I didn't want to work in restaurants. I had waited tables. I loved restaurants, but I was like, I don't think this is going to be like a healthy, good situation for me. And I don't think I would thrive on the line. And I remember I did the gastronomy program at BU and I did their culinary program. And I remember one of the chefs was like asking people what they were doing after school. And I was like, I'm going to try to be a personal chef because I knew I wanted to write. And I had a feeling that wasn't going to pay the bills, at least not out of the gate. And he's like, well, good luck with that. Like, nice work if you can get it. Like, thought that was the most like outrageous thing ever. And turns out, obviously, it's not. But I'm wondering, there is certainly a part of me who, looking back, I always saw the personal chefing as sort of like a means to an end in many ways. Like, it's just been such a wonderful way to hone my skills and have a steady paycheck while I sort of pursued media. And I look at something like Wishbone Kitchen and like, I love her content and I love all of that. I'm like, wow, should we have been talking about and documenting our private chef life since our early 20s? And like, what would that have been like for me? Like, this is just me project, but I'm like, what would my life have been totally different if I had done that? And I'm curious, sort of as somebody else who's straddling like the media world and the private chef world, like, how do you feel about this sudden like moment where people are thrilling about private chefing? Because I don't feel totally comfortable talking about it all the time. And I'm just curious what your experience is.
I mean, I'm under NDA for a lot of my clients. So like, yeah, there's definitely not necessarily name dropping happening. And I certainly would want to ask permission before filming in their home. I think a lot of what I'm seeing right now is like more celebrities, like they want to be part of, like they want to inject themselves into the food world. And it's like almost like they're using their personal chefs to like do that. Because I'll see people on TikTok where I'm like, oh, you're like Adam Sandler's personal chef or Mindy Kaling's. And I'm just like, oh, this is like a collaboration. This is not real.
I would think most of my clients would not want, I would never feel comfortable like exactly what you're saying. Like whether I've explicitly signed an NDA or not, I would not feel comfortable doing that. But yeah, it is a whole new situation.
I do think in some ways, I was just talking to a friend about this. So much of what we do, people don't see, right? So much of that job I felt was like so behind the scenes, like so in the trenches. And I am grateful that people understand now they understand the Instagram and TikTok version of what that job is. They don't necessarily see all the other negative sides of it, but they at least are aware of like the job. And I would guess that there's more demand for people. Like they're like, oh, I want to hire a private chef for my bachelorette party or my anniversary. I get a lot of inquiries like that, especially, yeah, like big birthday parties, like, and people get really excited. They're like, oh, you're the chef. And it's like, you didn't care about me like 10 years ago.
I used to just be the help. And now all of a sudden, like there's this sort of celebrity aura about it. It's very, and that's something, I don't know, I didn't even expect to talk with us, but I still struggle with that sometimes of feeling like, I often say like, oh, I want to be the person like giving the big tips, not receiving them. And I have so much respect for domestic service and all of that. And just, I'm in awe of, the people that I work with. But there's a part of me that like, the power dynamic there of like being, the help in someone's home. And especially as I get older, I feel like, when I was in my early 20s, to me, it felt like really cute and fun. And like, as I get older, I'm like, this is a challenging dynamic. I find it a challenging dynamic just in my own head. I'm curious, are you like, what is your relationship to private chefing these days?
I mean, I'm nodding because so much of what you're saying I agree with. And I think as I am getting older, I mean, I've been doing this since my early mid 20s. I think if you love like entertaining and like you're young and hungry, like it's the perfect job in a lot of ways. But I want to preserve a lot of that energy and that creativity toward like having people over on a Saturday.
I am curious about how you entertain because you are, again, you're such a professional home cook. You do have all this incredible experience. I know that you have so much advice to give when it comes to entertaining and like cooking at home. So if you are doing that, you are having a dinner party for your own friends and family on your own volition, making whatever you want. What are you making? And then teach us, Clare. Teach us on the podcast. What are some of your kind of top tips for hosting at home?
My relationship with hosting at home has really evolved because I actually think I entertained more when I lived in New York. Like there was kind of a novelty of like everyone just coming over and gathering around the coffee table, very casual. And like not a lot of my friends cooked. So I was the one, right? Living here in the Bay, like everyone, I mean, not everyone, but it's what I learned was like having people over, having a little backyard party or like a dinner party is like normal every week kind of thing. So I have to admit, like, I do feel a little intimidated sometimes because I bought like a 12-person dining room table during COVID and I actually sold it because I realized like I was not having those dinner parties. And I sort of had this like dip in my inspiration to entertain. But all this to say, I still do have people over and it usually looks like my holiday party my boyfriend and I host every year. We just had a paella party a few weeks ago just for fun. And then like off and on little like small parties. I love hosting people that don't know each other. I think getting into the cooking of it all, I think the guest list is really important, like who you're bringing to the table, those types of conversations, like who you want to mix and meet with each other. But in terms of like entertaining tips, everyone's going to tell you to do things ahead of time. Coming from like my previous job, having a 9 to 5 or usually like 9 to 7 job on Monday through Friday, I couldn't do that. So if I wanted to have people over on a Saturday, I was like shopping Saturday morning and like just like pulling it together. And I think that's fine. I think like it's nice to think that you're going to take 3 days to plan for a party, but like I'm not really doing that anymore. So what that looks like for me is back to like what I mentioned about like using your kitchen. So what can you put in the oven, right? Is it like a slow braise? What can you just quickly make on the stove? Honestly, if I can avoid the stove completely, because then I have to like clean the stove, I love that. So if it's like an oven thing and then like a sauce and a salad, something raw, perfect. The last thing I want to do is like be standing over the stove, like flipping meatballs or like fritters. It's just, that's not my style of cooking. That's not it. I would say don't make anything you've never made before. Things that you make for you and the people that live with you, those are the things that people are probably going to resonate with the most versus if you try to get super fancy. So I would say, you mentioned roast chicken, like that's always a great standby, but like, is it just something simple like throwing a piece of steak on the grill and like doing like a DIY like taco station where people can kind of customize, especially if you don't know everyone's dietary restrictions or people haven't gotten back to you on that kind of stuff. But in terms of like setting the scene, which I think is honestly my strength, like yes, the food's important, but do not underestimate the power of fresh flowers. That is something that I definitely learned at Williams-Sonoma. Any fresh flowers, yes, like they can be from Trader Joe's. You can go in your yard and like pick some branches and like weeds and put them in a jar and they look cute. I think bringing that element of like freshness and it shows that you've really like thought through things. I would say I'm a big proponent of cloth napkins. They don't need to be ironed or steamed.
I love this. Me too. And I'm so excited you're diving. It's because I was, in addition to the personal chef part, I was just like, you're Sur La Table and Williams-Sonoma pedigree. Like, come on, Clare. Like, we don't get to talk to somebody with, with this sort of pedigree every day. So, okay, cloth napkins and flowers for sure.
And like flowers, like, okay, flowers can get really expensive. I think a lot of the stuff I see around, I'm like, I know where to get those flowers. Like, that's a $60 bouquet. Like, so getting really good at like what you can mix and match it. Like from the grocery store, Trader Joe's has a really good selection. I always go for like, this is a tip I learned from a prop stylist, is like, if you want a bouquet to look a little more elevated, go for like a more monochromatic look. So instead of like a white flower and like a red flower, go for like all orange or like yellows and oranges or like all like pinks or all whites and creams. And you can do like a mix of different varietals there. Adding herbs is really nice too, like big sprigs of rosemary or like sage just tucked into like little bud vases with your flowers. It smells great. It looks great. It works in the context of a dinner party. Cloth napkins, I don't mind like mix and match. I have a set of black linen napkins, and then I have a bunch of like block print napkins that I picked up from like World Market, and just when I see them on sale, they usually do go on sale. The prints go on sale. So if you like prints, just wait till the end of the season and buy your prints. And I would say like the most important thing is just making sure that people are comfortable and they like don't feel like everything is so precious that they can't dig in. So I'm not a big canapé fan in general. Like anything that's like super persnickety, like a big bowl of dip. It could be store-bought dippers, whatever you have around. Little things that people can nibble on when people arrive. You don't need to have like hot apps necessarily. It could be like one nice cheese, some like spiced nuts, some olives, like done. And then when I'm thinking through the menu, I usually think about at least 3 to 4 different components on the plate. So usually like a protein or main, could be a vegetarian main. And then I think about like a sauce. And the sauce is something that is usually the thing that people will talk about. So if all else fails, nail the sauce. You're making sure that I do a lot of green sauces. I do a lot of like tahini sauces, salsas, things like that. Sauces, time and again, as I continue in my cooking career, it's the thing that gets comments on. I always have a salad or something kind of green. And then either if I'm serving like a nice, maybe like focaccia or something, I'm less precious about like having another like starch on the plate, but thinking about like how it's going to eat, it's like such a chefy term, but like, do they need a fork and knife? Could they just balance it on their lap and use a fork? Things like that. So that's sort of my thought process. I used to get really like caught up about like cleaning my house super well before people got there. And then I realized like you just need to make sure the bathroom's clean.
Yes, wipe down the bathroom, guys, and then you'll be fine. Wipe down the bathroom and make a good sauce, because I mean, the sauce is also an insurance policy, right? Like if, God forbid, you overcook the chicken a little bit, or something is a little bit bland, or it's not like looking that pretty, you have one sauce, like it's gonna cover your butt, basically.
Exactly.
I love the way that you combine aesthetics and like form and function. And so I feel like you are the perfect person to ask about what is worth investing in. Like I think about Sur La Table and I think about Williams Sonoma, and there's so much great quality stuff there. But I also think people can get overwhelmed and feel like, wow, everything is so expensive. And they're telling me I need like this particular fish fork and this particular pepper grinder. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, what are the things that you think are worth investing in? Where should we be getting the most bang for our buck when it comes to like beautiful quality kitchen products?
I love that question because it's the thing I got DMs the most about. And it's actually one of the things that made me want to start my Substack. The amount of like friends and family making wedding registries and saying like, what do I buy? Or what nonstick cookware do I buy? The nonstick cookware question was really what kicked off my deep dive into this world in breaking down like what I actually recommend. So here's the thing. When you're looking at a retail store, they're in the business of making money. So every season, they're going to make tiny tweaks to those products to sell them to you, right? So they've got tens of thousands of SKUs, products. So you go into a store, like you don't need everything in there, right? And it can be very overwhelming and very tough to figure out what you do need. And fortunately, I can help you. But unfortunately, when you do buy those things, you're not going to be the best. You're not going to be the best customer because what you need is actually quite boring and will last you a long time. And I think that everyone has different senses of style, and I think you can infuse that in different ways. But what you need 3 knives. You need an 8-inch chef's knife. You need a serrated bread knife and a paring knife. I use my chef's knife the most. You don't need a carving fork. You can use tongs. You don't need a boning knife unless you're a fisherman or, a fish fillet knife.
I am going to fight you on the boning knife because I like my boning knife because of the flexible blade.
Yes,
I feel like
true.
it's good for like cutting corn off the cob or whatever. But I appreciate, as a like staunch frugal New Englander with like the most beat up cookware ever, I appreciate that you're not pushing it. And wait, before we move on from knives, can we talk about, because I think people have a lot of questions about knives in particular. And I'm always like, the most basic, look for the full tang, like make sure if you're in a place like Williams-Sonoma, like all the knives are going to be good. I tell people to pick them up and see how they feel. But do you have any, you worked in the store, like what should they think about with knives?
It is great if you can go to a store that you can test them out. And a lot of those stores, those 2 stores I worked at, I think they do still do testing. Like there'll be like a carrot and a cutting board in the back. And there is someone that's typically dedicated to selling knives that they know their stuff. But yes, it's like holding a tennis racket, right? It's a new grip. And so you want to make sure that grip feels good. And so there's definitely different handles for different hands. So I would say make sure you try it out and expect to pay at least $100. I would say like you're going to see knives that just go unlimited cost. But I would say a good knife's going to be around $100 to $150. And in terms of brands, there's a lot out there. And I tend to like Japanese knives myself. I think they hold their edge a little longer. They're a little more lightweight, a little thinner. And just like any product, they do go on sale. So make sure that you're checking, for those like Black Friday deals. But if you buy yourself a good knife, you won't ever need to buy it. You typically, I think it'll last you at least half a lifetime. So
yeah, unless you lose it. I almost lost my whole thing of knives on the bus once coming out from culinary school, which was, thank God someone like found them and chased me down. But as long as you don't lose your knives, they last for a really long time. What else do we need in the kitchen?
Okay, you need a good cutting board. And I mainly turn to 2 different boards. I like a booze block, which is a heavy wood cutting board. They are expensive, but they're heavy duty. You don't even necessarily need to put a wet paper towel underneath because they're so heavy, but that is a trick. Put a wet paper towel underneath your cutting board so it doesn't slide. Always. And then I like a thinner board just for like quick day-to-day stuff. Like sometimes I don't want to pull out the booze block if I'm just like cutting up an apple. So for that, I can go with like a mixed material board, like from Epicurious. I have a board I like from Material Kitchen. I don't think it's plastic. I'd have to fact check that. But just something like quick and easy. I don't have a dishwasher, but in theory, you could put it in the dishwasher if you needed to. And then cookware. This is going to be your biggest investment. And I think your most important because it's the thing that you're cooking on. So you have your knives, you have your cutting board. You can do a lot with a cast iron skillet, and they're not expensive, and there's very little innovation. So again, you can go into like any hardware store and get a Lodge cast iron. I would say at least a 10-inch. That will give you the most versatility. If you cook larger quantities, you can get a 12-inch. That's a big boy. And those are going to be around $25 to maybe $40, $50. And they're a lot easier to use than you think. Just no dishwasher, no soaking. You really just need to like rinse them.
What about acid? I always feel like you don't want to do a lot of acid and like you're not deglazing in your cast iron with wine.
I was just working on a recipe that had about a half a cup of vinegar, and the recipe I'm testing called for a cast iron. And I was like, we're going to use enameled cast iron. So yes, acid can interact with cast iron if you're cooking it for a long time. I think if you're just quickly deglazing or like throwing some tomatoes to like blister, you're fine. But you definitely don't want to like braise vinegar or acid in a cast iron. It's just going to turn the flavors a little off. So enameled cast iron, that is brands like Stobe or Le Creuset or Lodge has actually great enameled cast iron. I love a brazier. So like a deep, wide handled pan that you can use to obviously braise, but you can use it to make one pot chicken and rice. You could use it to make like a quick tomato sauce. That surface area is going to cook things a lot faster and more evenly. And then of course a Dutch oven. So This is one of those things like it's very stylish and there's always going to be new colors every year that you're going to be tempted to buy. You got to commit to a color. And the best part about buying something like Staub or Le Creuset is you can change out the knobs. They're called finials.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
All these years.
And they're not too pricey. So if you like to kind of change the vibe of your kitchen, a lot of these brands, they have like a Christmas pot, they have a Halloween pumpkin shaped pot. You don't need that.
Oh my God, absolutely not.
So yeah, just like changing out the knobs, you can get them online for like $10, and there's like gold and different like shapes and yeah. And then in terms of cookware, like your day-to-day cookware, I'm a big proponent of stainless steel. So cooking on stainless steel is in fact nonstick cooking if you know how to use your pans right and you keep them clean. And they are pricey and they require a little bit more upkeep than a nonstick pan that you can just toss in the dishwasher. But I would say stainless steel is just going to give you the best results, the best heat conductivity, the best browning.
Are you talking about like carbon steel or like a thick stainless steel?
A stainless steel, a Le Creuset. I have Demier, which is like too fancy for most people. But yeah, like an all-clad stainless steel, basic, yeah. Carbon steel, I think for most home cooks is a little advanced.
I think we went through a moment when I was at Milk Street with Chris Kimball and we were like all in. And in the back of my head, sorry, Chris, I was like, no one's going to do this. Like, no one's going to do this.
I worked on a few carbon steel launches at Williams-Sonoma. And I was thinking to myself, like, well, I like this pan, but this is even more difficult to work with than cast iron. A lot of chefs would be like, no, it's not. But it's like the average home cook is throwing their dishes in the dishwasher.
Yeah. Okay. So stainless steel pan. It's time to, I have had mine for like 20 years and it is so beat up. And it's not a super fancy one, but I've finally made the decision that it's time to upgrade and buy a new stainless steel. So you just named a couple great brands. Can you talk to me a little bit about the care and keeping? Because I didn't care and keep this one and I'd like to do better next time.
I'm a big devotee of Dawn Power Wash. You can use Barkeeper's Friend, which is a powder. They also have a gel. Barkeeper's Friend is great for cleaning stainless steel. You can also use it for cleaning like the inside of your stainless steel sink, but it will get your stainless steel pans super clean. And you sprinkle it in the pan and then kind of make a paste, a little bit of water and a sponge and let it sit. And then you do need to scrub a little bit, especially if you've got like a lot of stuck on oil residue. Definitely don't use nonstick sprays with those pans. Think of a nonstick spray like hairspray. It builds up over time and it will create a film on your pans that's really hard to get off, especially like around the edges or like any knobs inside. But yeah, Dawn Power Wash, not sponsored, but should be. It is, I call it like the micellar water of dish detergents because you just spray it on, let it sit for like 10 seconds and you barely need to scrub it. It like breaks down any gunk.
It's like a skincare routine, but for your cookware.
No, it is actually. And like then there's like oils for your cast iron pan. It is, yeah, it made some material. So yeah, I would say making sure that you don't have any of that residue on the sides, but not overheating your pan and I will really help the cleaning process. I also would say for cast iron or for stainless steel to heat your pan first and then add your oil versus heating your oil with your pan because that can really create that residue. But yeah, I mean, I've destroyed some stainless steel in my day and cast iron for that matter. And usually just a little soak and some elbow grease.
Maybe I'll give it one more try. I mean, the level, it looks like it looks like it's lived in a diner for like 5 years or longer. I mean, it's upsetting, but yeah, I'm vowing to do better because I actually used Barkeep and like I couldn't get through.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
I couldn't get through. It was pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Okay, Claire. So in addition to your Substack on cooking, which we are loving for recipes and, like everything around recipes and entertaining, you also made a pretty exciting announcement recently that you are working on a cookbook. And I would love to hear a little bit about that.
That is like a complete, like, honestly, clickbait title because I'm working on someone else's book. So I am working on a book, but it's not my book. And I think that the more that I chat with friends and family who are in the industry, the more I realize that people don't necessarily understand how some books get on the shelf.
So many books get on the shelf that way.
Yeah. Co-writers, ghostwriters, collaborators, and there's so many different arrangements and crediting that happens. But I am working on a book with a dear friend of mine from culinary school. This is her third book. This is my first book I'm working on with her. And my job is essentially like head recipe tester and also a copywriter. So I'm writing a lot of the ancillary copy in terms of like the pantry section, menu sections, some, punching up some of the head notes, which is the little blurb before the recipe, and then taking the recipe from like a Google Doc to a fully fleshed out written recipe in line with the publisher's style guide. There is a editor at the publisher that will be obviously going through and making sure that it's all checks and balances align, but it's a really fun project. And I essentially am putting myself in the shoes of the author, writing in her voice and making sure that her brand comes across in the recipes.
You have such a strong, sort of like personal brand and POV. How has it affected your creativity, and what's been different as you're sort of zooming into this other person's world?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of my career executing other people's ideas. Not to say that I don't have my own, but I'm pretty comfortable like going back into this role. So much of my career has been I worked on another author's cookbook as well, and thinking about like it's not necessarily what I would do, but I know that it's what they would do and what would serve their audience. And it is a muscle. And sometimes like I have to take my personal style or like preferences out of the picture for just that period of time that I'm working on it. So I would say that it has strengthened my voice because I realized like, wow, I actually don't agree with that, or I wouldn't do it like that, or I would never serve that. And and that's why we have all these books on the shelf. We need all POVs, we need all voices. And yeah, it's actually I think it's made me hone in on my voice more working with other people.
I know both you and I have worked for other people and sort of brought other people's voice to the front, or our job has been to kind of make somebody else glow or polish their work or contribute in that way. I'm curious what it's been like to really dive into your Substack and have a place for your own voice and your own creativity. And can you share a little bit about that process?
In my career, I've spent so much of it working with other people's ideas, other people's visions, other brands' goals, even with like product launches and campaigns, and working in my Substack where there are literally no rules, aside from like staying true to my voice. That has been, in a way, it's been overwhelming. At first, I was like really energized by it and like was like cranking out posts like twice a week, just like I had basically been like pent up for years, not necessarily like not having a place to channel that creativity. And as the years gone on, like I've realized how much out there is not necessarily copied, but like I really struggled with like the idea of like, do I put affiliate links in? And like, I ultimately decided to do that. And because it, I think there's a lot of like purist mentality in a way. Like I think when I joined Substack, it was like a very different place than where it is now, where it's become very much a social media platform. There's a feed, there's video, there are like people doing sponsored posts. But with all of that, I just want to make sure that I'm serving my audience. And I think about like my aunt, my mom, my sister, who I know read, and like, would this serve them? Like they are people who cook and put food on the table every night, and they are the people that I think about. And I'm also thinking about like what I'm actually interested in versus like what everyone else is talking about or doing, like, and jumping on a bandwagon versus like creating my own bandwagon.
I completely resonate with the idea of like the no guardrails being scary. And also, yeah, having to define, I don't know how interested, people listening would be, but the editorial landscape has changed so much. I came from a newspaper. So when you talk about like no affiliate links, like, are you kidding me? I was like barely allowed to make eye contact with a PR person. It was like the strictest editorial. And I love that I was trained in that way, but there's also the reality of I want food media to survive and I want there to be creative voices. And if people don't want to pay for journalism, like how does the thing get made? And one of the beautiful things I like about Substack is you can actually pay creators for their work. But I also understand that people have limits on how many things they can subscribe to. And so I think I'm just also from like a business perspective, I'm really curious how this sort of evolves I heard someone, maybe it's Emily Sundberg, call it like the plumbing of these media companies. And I'm just happy that a place like Substack is allowing, writers like you and all these other wonderful food writers that we know to, play around and try to find a model that works for them in order to share their voices. So Clare, in every episode, I do what's called the busy brain round, since I'm often speaking to cooks with ADHD or attention issues. And what that means is I would love for you to share two things. One, what is something that sparks creativity for you in the kitchen? And then two, what is something that calms the chaos for you in the kitchen?
The thing that sparks creativity for me is getting a new ingredient and specifically a new spice. I cook with a lot of spices, dried spices and herbs. And if there's one that I haven't had, or if I'm like, new to me, right? I will fixate on it. And I will put it next to my stove and like that is all I will use for like a week. And sometimes it can just be like a little jar. And I don't know what it is, but like just something like swapping in, like I would typically use, I don't know, like za'atar. And now I'm using this like Persian lime curry from Oaktown Spice, like on everything. And that to me is a very practical way to spur inspiration. And the thing that calms my busy brain is making sure that before I start cooking that I've cleaned my kitchen. And I could not cook in a messy kitchen. It doesn't need to be like perfect, but no dishes in the sink, preferably no dishes on the dish rack, just the countertop cleared. That really makes me calm down and feel like I can tackle this versus feeling overwhelmed and like, oh, there's like dishes on top of dishes. So it's one of those things like takes 3 minutes, set a timer and do what you can, but makes a big difference.
You mentioned thinking about your mom and your sister, which I love. I do that all the time. But I am curious, who is On Cooking for? Like who is your audience? Who are you speaking to besides obviously your dear family?
I have actually learned from my audience that they are a lot more plugged into the food world than I thought. And it's been really fun to kind of see the On Cooking audience versus like my Instagram audience or my TikTok audience, which is like actually my biggest platform, but I don't have as much personal intel into who they are. I would say that I'm writing toward the person who definitely likes to cook at home. They cook out of necessity. They don't necessarily want to eat out every meal. They want to level things up beyond just trying out a new recipe. So I think about the person who wants to improve their efficiency, who wants to upgrade their cookware, who wants to do things better, faster, easier to make their cooking life more joyful. That's who I'm thinking of. And a lot of my friends in their mid to late 30s, early 40s, with or without kids, they all seem to resonate with the content. And I live in a rental. I don't have a huge kitchen. I think that flows into my work a lot of the times where like there are some restrictions that I'm working through and you can still have a beautiful meal.
You don't have a dishwasher, Clare.
I know that's like my campaign for 2026 is to like get Clare a dishwasher.
I support that campaign. I just got a hood fan, which I've never had proper ventilation ever. And when I got the first part of my advance for my cookbook, I was like, I am buying myself, like I'm treating myself to a hood fan. And so I went to my favorite, not sponsored, Yale Appliance has this outlet and everything in my house is from their scratch and dent department. And I found like a dream hood with this like tiny little dent on the corner, which was a great deal. And it was like the most luxurious, exciting thing ever. And so I'm excited. It's still actually like in the process of being installed because I live in an ancient house. And of course we found like an eroded pipe in the process of installing it. But when I turn it on, it's going to be like a really special moment. And I assume it'll be the same when I'm sure you've had a dishwasher in the past, but you deserve one now.
Yes. Yeah. Never in California. So I'm due.
Well, Clare, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. I am so excited to continue to watch On Cooking and see, where that takes you and get I'm definitely going to be referencing it for my next cookware purchase. And of course, we'll stay abreast of all your new projects and this book you're working on and everything else. And I think people are really going to benefit from a lot of the practical tips that you shared from all of your work in culinary production and personal chefing and running the full gamut. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Catherine. And I love seeing what you're doing this all too, and cannot wait for your new book.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, see you soon. And you, thank you for being here. I hope you leave this conversation feeling ready to level up your cooking and channel your inner private chef. But before you go, I need to ask for one thing that would mean so much to me in the show. Please go to my website, catherinesmart.com, to keep in touch, subscribe to my newsletter, and follow my podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And before you leave, please take a moment to share this episode with a food-loving, busy-brained friend or someone you know who could use some help making mealtime easier and a little bit more enjoyable. All right, I'll see you next time.